Chapter 28. Bhumika. The Yaksa loved being up on the Hirana. The Hirana loved them in turn. Its walls shone lustrous with leaves and flowers that grew in profusion through the new fractures in the stone. The effigies of the Yaksa gleamed with vines and soft blooms. Sendhil liked to tend to them. He took great satisfaction in gazing at them as vegetation unfurled gently around them. Once he said to Bhumika, "They'll all return soon. All of them." She looked at the statues. Innumerable Yaksa, she thought distantly. One for every village, family, tree, flower. "I look forward to the day," Bhumika said in return. More than the Hirana, the Yaksa loved worship. An endless stream of people rose up the Hirana with their offerings and bowed their heads, weeping and awed before the Yaksa. No guards stopped them any longer from milling at the Hirana's base. No guards dared, and Bhumika would not ask them to do so. The worshippers begged for good fortune. They begged for a better Ahiranya, and so very many of them begged to have the rot of their bodies cured. A woman bowed before Chandni now. She, Sendhil, Sanjana, and Nandi sat upon the Triveni in a semicircle, expressions mild, curious. Bhumika stood behind them with Ashok at her side and a mask on her face. She watched. "Please, Ancient One," the woman whispered, trembling. There were deep violet flowers rising from the knot of her bound hair, snaking their way down the exposed line of her neck. When she raised her face, Bhumika saw a cluster of buds at the corner of her mouth. "Please, I beg you, cure me. I'll give anything I have. Please." The Yaksa were still. Then suddenly Chandni leaned forward. She touched a hand to the woman's cheek. "What offering have you brought us?" "Food," the woman said tremulously. "All the food I have. I have nothing else." "Worship us, and I promise the greenness in you will grow no longer," Chandni murmured, gazing at the woman. Beneath her fingers the woman flinched, then went still. "See," said Chandni. "You feel it. What you call rot won't grow. You will live. Keep your food, small one, and live on." "Thank you," the woman said. "Thank you." She prostrated again and again, rose to her feet, and bowed her head once more. "And when you have a child," Chandni said, a gentle smile curving her mouth, "bring them to us. Let us see if they are worthy of rising to our temple. That is the only offering I demand of you." Bhumika could not control what she felt, the honor that poured through her in a wave. She wondered if the Yaksa could feel it, if they could taste the salt of her fear, the frantic thrum of her heartbeat, the nausea rising in her stomach. After the woman had stumbled away, still whimpering her thanks, Bhumika said, "Priya used to do something similar." At her side, Ashok gave her a look, hungry, yearning. She didn't look at him in return. She would halt the rot inside people, in plants. It was no cure, but it was survival. "Is that what you have done?" "Such curiosity," Sanjana said, delighted, and Chandni replied, "Yes, daughter, your kin's gifts are from us, after all, as are your own." Bhumika clasped her hand in front of her, seeking calm, forcing it into her voice as she said, "I wish you had allowed me to summon her home." "She cannot come home," Sendhil said. "Not yet." "She lives," Bhumika thought, relief rushing through so fiercely that she feared she might crumple, and there. "She lives. She lives." "We want no one to leave Ahiranya," Nandi said, "and we want no one to come. So no one shall." No one to leave, no one to come. Relief gave way to swift creeping horror. She thought of the merchants who regularly crossed the border, the Ahiranyi who traded regularly with neighboring cities. "No one shall," she repeated faintly. "I understand." "Bhumika," Ashok murmured at her side. She forced her hands to relax, and the tension in her shoulders to ease. Behind her mask, she closed her eyes and did not answer him. "Bhumika," he said again. A new group of worshippers entered, and he fell silent, but his eyes stayed on her. There had been no Shrungani or Aloran merchants for weeks. She had thought they were too frightened to come, or simply too wise. When she had considered them, it had only been to wonder how the world beyond Ahiranya had reacted to the news of the Yaksa's return? Did they fear the rise of the second age of flowers? Were they already rallying weapons and soldiers, working together to try to obliterate Hiranya's power once more? She could not ruminate on the question. She had so much to worry about in her own home, her own temple. But she had her answer now regardless. No one knew the Yaksa lived. No one had passed the borders alive to tell the tale. She stood in the Mahal's rose garden, with her crown mask pressed to her face, and reached into the green, far, far through thorn and soil, through her roots to the borders of her kingdom. Tangled as she'd been with attending to the Yaksa, she had not looked, not seen. She took off the mask. Her hands shook. "Jivan," she called out, voice thin. He stood at the edge of the gardens waiting for her. Whatever look he saw on her face made him stride swiftly toward her, his usually impassive face softened with concerned, dark eyebrows furrowed. "My lady?" "I have an order," she managed. She touched the back of her hand to her cheek. It came away wet. "No matter. The borders. Close them. If anyone, Ahiranyi or outsider, attempts to leave, make your men turn them back. Tell your men it is their only responsibility. Tell them this task is a matter of life or death." She turned the mask over in her hands, stared at the varnished wood, the glow of it under sunlight. "The Yaksa do not want anyone to know they live once more, and they will not ask anyone to stay in Ahiranya or politely request that no one leaves. They will kill them, like the rider you sent left at my door. They—" He touched his knuckles to her hand. His hand was so much larger than her own, flecked with scars. She quieted and looked up at him. "It will be done," he said. "Careful," she said in return. "The mask will burn you." "I am not afraid, milady," he said solemnly. "Foolish. I will simply have to protect you then." She folded the mask into her palu. He lowered his hand and stepped back. "Go now." He hesitated. "Don't remain alone," he said. "My lady, go to your daughter." She shook her head. "I will go to my work," she replied. "But thank you, Jivan. She did not like to be vulnerable. "Thank you," she said again. Ganam met her in the corridors later, sidled casually up to her, and said, "Rook and I are going to train," he told her, "during the midday rest, if you want to see his progress." "I'll come to the practice yard," Bhumika said. When she arrived after settling Padma for her nap, the two rebels were sparring, scythe blades sparking in the hot sun. She watched for a moment from the shade. Then, when they both paused, she said to Rook, "You're improving." "Thank you, Elder," Rook said, panting. He wiped sweat from his brow, hooked the scythe against his hip. The movement was almost beginning to look practiced. "Ganam, can I—" "Go on," he said. To Bhumika he said, "I'll keep watch. You talk." Rook told her the way the Yaksa vanished, sometimes, into the orchard, only returning when all the trees were twisted and strange, out toward the forest, even into the Hirana. "Melting the wall away," he said, "opening a corridor and walking through it. I guess they're going to the Deathless Waters." "If you witness that, then you are taking too many risks, Rook," Bhumika said sharply. "I asked for your assistance. I don't require you to put yourself in danger of death, you understand?" "They don't notice me," said Rook. "They never do." "They may be pretending not to notice you," Bhumika said. Talking to Rook always reminded her of talking to Priya when they were both only girls, an act of trying to direct wild, aimless energy to a useful purpose, without giving the fire of her more fuel. But Rook was gentler by nature, which was a relief. He took it to direction and praise like a plant thirsting for light and water. "But you've done well," Bhumika said, and as she expected he brightened, smiled at her. But his smile quickly dimmed. "The one who looks like a little boy. He doesn't know I'm watching, but he always wants to be around other children." "I don't want to scare you, Elder," Rook said, "but he thinks Padma is interesting. He likes following when Kalita takes her outside." Bhumika's insides went cold. She thought of Padma sleeping against her chest, the warm weight of her, the softness of her curls, the rise and fall of her breaths. She abruptly wanted to be with her daughter again desperately. "Thank you for telling me, Rook," she said. He looked at her and nodded resolutely. "I will try and find something better," he vowed, "something more useful." "I told you," Bhumika said. "You need to take care. No foolish risks. Promise me." He nodded again, quickly this time. Then, as if they'd never spoken, he and Gundam resumed their sparring. Passivity had never suited Bhumika. No one was coming to save her from the strange circumstances she had found herself in. She would have to find her own solution. One afternoon, when the day was still blistering hot, she called for a palanquin. She wore her temple whites, as she often did, but she also wore her gold, her nath and earrings, her bracelets and a necklace, as she always did when she dealt with highborn. This had to have the appearance of a political journey. She adorned herself for the lie. There was nothing strange about her needing to meet with one of her highborn in their own haveli. She assured herself the Yaksa would not remark on it. What care did they have, after all, for mortal politics? And if they did remark, she would bow her head and give some petty explanation, and that would, she hoped, be the end of it. Jivan met her with the palanquin and a handful of soldiers to carry it. They made their way across the city swiftly, despite the stifling heat. In the Pink Lantern district, where there had once been nothing but pleasure houses, was a library. Nestled between rows of lantern-strung buildings, it was a modest building with pale walls and narrow windows, its interior pleasantly cool and filled with the noise of rustling paper, distant strains of song and laughter from the pleasure houses, and the hum of voices reciting the birch bark mantras. Ever since she and Priya had taken over leadership of Ahiranya, Bhumika had made a point of investing in the arts in a way she had never been able to do as a regent's wife. Even when there had been precious little coin to spare, she had arranged for a library to be built, where sages and poets could study and share their work, and keep their creations safely stored. Under Parijatvipan rule, it was the scholars and artists who had kept the memory of Ahiranyi faith and culture alive. The birch bark mantras had survived in their recitations, in handwritten copies, hidden by household after household. Bhumika understood very well that to build a new Ahiranya would require strong foundations. A nation could not survive without food, but it also could not survive without a soul either. Kritika may have believed the Hirana was where the soul of Ahiranya lay, but in Bhumika's eyes it was here. Bhumika emerged from her palanquin before the library's steps. Jivan offered his hand, and she took it. He clasped it carefully, his palms warm and calloused against her own. With the daylight behind him, veiling his face, he was reduced to the harshest angles, his strong jaw and that pronounced blade of a nose, but she could feel the softness of his gaze on her, just as palpably as she could feel the gentle guidance of his hand. Ever since the day in the rose garden, he had been more careful with her. She straightened and clasped his hand tighter in return. "I'm well," she tried to say with her eyes, her touch. His head lowered, and after a moment he released her. They walked together into the interior of the library. A woman met them near the entrance with a bow and a smile. "Elder," she said, "welcome. How can I help you today?" "Have you been well, Amina?" "I have, though my hands do ache." A rueful laugh. "I've been copying poems all morning." Amina had survived when a dozen other scribes and maidservants had been murdered for crimes against the empire. Now she was a scribe herself, hair tonsured, fingers ink-stained. "I would love to see them," Bhumika replied, "though perhaps not today." She stepped deeper into the library. The dim interior was pleasant after the heat of the day. "I need to see your collection of ancient texts." "Of course," Amina said without batting an eye. "Let me guide you." There were few ancient tomes of faith left in Ahiranya. The birch bark mantras had survived largely by word of mouth and memory, and what had once been carefully preserved on the Hirana, etched into stone and stored on inked leaf scrolls, had been burned along with Bhumika's temple siblings. But here, carefully wrapped and stored away, were texts of worship and theory and philosophy, salvaged from shops and hiding places in the oldest households and sages' personal collections. Some had even been preserved, to Bhumika's surprise, by priests of the mothers. "Jivan," Amina said, once Bhumika was settled at a table surrounded by scrolls and books so fragile they near seemed to decay from contact with the air. If you want to say hello to the others, they'll be glad to see you. Jivan inclined his head in mute thanks, and Amina departed. You've been here without me? Bhumika asked, surprised. If she had not known Jivan so well, she would have missed how his jaw twitched a little at that. He was embarrassed. I am not a scholar, he said. I meant no judgment, Bhumika said honestly. My apologies, Jivan. No need, my lady. He swallowed and then said, I like tales, like hearing them. The scribes like sharing them. You are allowed to have interests, she said quietly. And you are allowed to have friends. She looked down at the scroll before her. The writing was archaic, the ink blurred into smears by years of humidity. Reading through all of this would be painstaking work. You may go and see them if you like, she said. I'll spare you this. Jivan was briefly quiet. Then he came to kneel at the table across from her. No, my lady. I'll stay and help. They worked silently for a long time, long enough that the sun's rays slanted and dimmed as the afternoon settled in. There is one scribe, he said, who has collections of tales for children. He told me once about a mongoose and a snake that I will not be reciting to Padma. He frowned, and so disapproving that it made her want to laugh. But there are other, kinder stories. I am sure Padma would love to hear tales from you, Bhumika said. Jivan turned to look at her, startled, and she smiled, the first true smile she had worn in what felt like weeks. He blinked at her. She may even like the tale of the mongoose and the snake. Fables for children are often horrific, I found, Bhumika said, as she opened another book, and children never see the horror in them as we do. Lady Bhumika, what do you hope to find here? She reached for a new tome, opened it. Any information about the Yaksa I can use to understand them and to protect our own interests. But truthfully, I expected I will find nothing. Sometimes it is necessary to act and plan, simply to know you're still capable of it. To assure yourself you are still fighting, even in your circumstances do not alter. She opened a new scroll, paused. An image was laid out before her. The shape of a body run through with roots. It was not a Yaksa, or at least she was fairly sure it was not. It looked far too human, a mortal bound to something grander than itself, bound by roots old and deep, stretching gold and green and red through it and beyond it, drifting into deeper waters. Something was teasing at the corners of her memory, something she had seen, something she had known. If my elders lived, she thought, running her thumb over the hues of paint, disquiet thrumming in her blood, what would they tell me about this image? What knowledge died with them that could save me now? She took the scroll with her when they departed. That evening, something touched her mind in the sangam, a call, a song. It beckoned her and she walked across the corridor on legs that did not obey her, that carried her from her own room to the nursery where her child slept, as if she had heard Padma cry. But she had not. There was only silence and the susurration of leaves and a tug beneath Bhumika's breastbone, winding. And there, in her child's room, I thought you would come, Chandni said. The moonlight was a spill over her shoulders. In its light, the darkness of her hair was a river, the slick dark growth of fronds beneath water. I called for you. The sangam carries echoes so sweetly. Padma was awake in Nandi's arms, but she was silent, staring up at the Yaksa that held her with wide dark eyes. There was ice in Bhumika's veins. You have been resisting us, Nandi said, in the child voice of his, rocking Padma lightly as if she were a much smaller baby. Fighting us in your heart, seeking out our secrets. I am a temple elder. It is my duty to learn, Bhumika managed, to rule. If you have questions, you must come to us. You must learn to trust, Chandni said, touching her fingertip to Bhumika's lower lip. Her fingertip was far too soft, like fruit over-ripened. You must trust us with your country, your faith, your people, your child. We will take care of her, said Chandni. and you will trust in us." There was nothing in Bhumika, nothing but the way her own eyes were drawn to the empty cot, to her baby in Nandi's arms. Nothing but the desire to move forward and grasp Padma and run, and run. It was an animal, awful desire, as all her cleverness, her control, her strength crumpled inside her, leaving nothing but agony. "No." "Yaksa," Bhumika managed. "Elder Chandni, please, I will do whatever you require. Only not this." The Yaksa, who was not Chandni, gave a sad smile and shook her head. "Your little one will remain in our care for now." A choked noise came from the corner of the room, and Bhumika realized Kalida had been there all along, trembling with terror even as she bowed. "I am only a maid," Kalida said in the smallest voice Bhumika had ever heard her use. "Yaksa, immortal one, please allow me to attend to the child." "No," Chandni said softly. "No, that would be unwise." She turned back to Nandi, and he placed Padma back in her cot. There were vines winding unsteadily through the windows. "Both of you go," she said, "and perhaps you will see her tomorrow." Bhumika could not move. "There is no need for fear, Elder Bhumika," said Chandni. "The Yaksa have raised many a child before. Whole temple councils were reared by our hands. Rest well and trust in us." Bhumika lowered her head. "Yaksa," she said, heart howling, "as you say." She was bound. This was better than a knife at her throat. They had her, her own gods, by the heart, and it was too late, far too late, for anything to be done to stop it.